Hey guys, it's time to go over Chapter 4, States of Consciousness. If you will, like always, get out your laptop and, or if you have your laptop open, open up our Blackboard site, PowerPoint slides, and follow along with the PowerPoint slides, if you will. So this is Chapter 4, Consciousness. The first slide, of course, as we open it up, the PowerPoint, is the terms. These are terms I'd like you to focus on. Probably going to do well if you use that as a review for the test. We won't cover every single term on here, but that is a good place to start. So with slide 2, the introduction to consciousness. Consciousness is our personal and immediate awareness. I like to explain to students that consciousness is what you are currently aware of, things that are in your brain right now that you are thinking about. It could be mental activity. It could be things that you have to do later or things you've done earlier in the day. It could be what I'm talking about. It could be internal sensations. For me, like it would be your temperature, or like a little bit right now my throat is scratchy because of allergies, so that's something I'm thinking about. External stimuli, if somebody was mowing outside or dogs were barking or the fan blowing, these are all external things in my environment, and I am consciously aware of these things. These things are a part of my conscious thought. When we get to the chapter on personality theory, it'll make more sense when we talk about Freud, because he talks about other states of consciousness in a different way than we traditionally understand consciousness. So Freud, we will dig a little bit deeper into that. But in this chapter, we have to define consciousness, because for the rest of the chapter, what we're really talking about is alternate states of consciousness, such as sleep. So we have different levels of awareness and consciousness throughout the day. One of the things that that's a very important thing to note about states of consciousness is the biological side to this. So there's a biological clock in our brains that kind of regulate some of the things that are happening through our day biologically. We have these ebbs and flows, or these highs and lows of variation throughout our day, and this is called an individual's circadian rhythm. So a circadian rhythm is located in the brain, in a part of the hypothalamus, and it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN. And this is within the hypothalamus of the brain that produces these levels throughout the day. If you want to look at the levels, look on slide number 4. And here's an example of a typical human circadian rhythm. So throughout the day, you would have peak mental alertness and memory. I always tell my students, now this is kind of an average circadian rhythm example. Yours might fluctuate or vary from this a little bit, but there are times, if you started to pay attention and even record some of these things, that you have, regardless of other things that are going on in your environment, peak mental alertness and memory. There's certain times of the day that you're probably better at taking a college lecture class than others, or better at studying, or there's certain times of the day you just kind of zone out. This would be part of that human circadian rhythm. There's body temperature fluctuation during the days, highs and lows. So regardless of what's happening in your external environment, there's sometimes the body temperature is a lot higher and hotter, and other times of the day it's lower. You have peak sensitivity to like smell and taste and hearing and touch. These things throughout the day can be more attuned and more sensitive than other times of the day as a human being. Sensitivity to pain can fluctuate throughout the day. And lastly, degrees of sleepiness. So when we talk about degrees of sleepiness, we often associate that with a chemical in the brain, a hormone that looks a lot like a neurotransmitter called melatonin. So melatonin is something that your brain produces, and typically it is affected by both your internal biological rhythms and external environmental cues. Melatonin makes you sleepy, makes you drowsy. It's what starts to be produced to start setting a human being into the stages of sleep. So melatonin is produced in the brain, and usually at the time that it's time to go to bed is often associated with light. So the darker it is in your room, outside, when your brain recognizes darkness, it tends to produce more melatonin. That's why in this chapter, a major theme is that when it's time for you to fall asleep and maybe you don't have good sleep hygiene or good habits, it's good to recognize what's happening in your environment, because your environment or something that's external can affect the internal biological processes preparing your brain and your body for sleep. So with melatonin, darkness can help produce melatonin. I often recommend, and studies show, that when the environment that you want to sleep in is dark or dim, when you turn off external lights, especially lights from technology, your brain will produce more melatonin. So it's important to associate that external room, like turning your lights down or a warm bath or soft soothing music. All these things are going to start to help your body and your brain prepare for sleep, and part of that is to produce melatonin. The opposite is true. If you're trying to wake up and feel alert, you want bright light, you want sunlight, you want oxygen to the brain, you want activity. But to feel sleepy and produce melatonin, you want the opposite. So if you'll look on slide 6, it starts to talk about how we know what we know about sleep and sleep research. So there is a machine called an EEG that produces a graph that helps measure your brainwave activity. The things we know about sleep are because of scientists, and this was early sleep science done in the 1920s. If you're watching your crash course video, you'll get a little more background about the man that discovered this. He invented this machine, and the machine doesn't cause any pain, but he hooked his son up to it and was amazed at what that boy's brainwave activity was doing being awake versus being asleep. So he studied this brainwave activity, and he realized that there are different brainwave activity stages or sleep stages that a human goes through, and I'm sure animals do too, but they're not exactly the same as humans, but that the brain goes through different stages and different brainwave activity, from being awake to being drowsy to being in light sleep to deep sleep, and then lastly REM sleep. So this EEG shows these patterns and helps us study, and is often used in sleep studies with other types of technology, biological technology, to try to recognize and identify when somebody has a sleep disorder or insomnia or some kind of disease that is keeping them from getting a good night's sleep. So that's what an EEG does. We're now going to go to slide 8, where we look at the first 90 minutes of sleep and what happens with the brain waves during these stages, and then we'll look at a pattern through with a 7 to 8 to 9 hour pattern. But this is in the beginning. So when a person is awake and alert, you'll see with the chart that they are producing what's called beta brainwaves activity. These brain waves are fast and short. As you get deeper and deeper into your stages of sleep, you're going to notice that this brainwave activity, and it's kind of shown in the chart here, gets longer and slower. So the deeper the sleep, the different of the wavelengths of this brainwave activity and the different names of this different stages. So when you're awake and alert, you are producing what's called beta brainwaves. And then as you start to get drowsy and you start creating an environment of no light, no technology, a warm bed but a cool room, a dark environment, then the brain typically produces what's called alpha brain waves, where you're drowsy and you're sleepy. And you could have alpha brain waves kind of being out of it when you just kind of start to daydream, or if you've ever been in a situation where you've driven the same route over and over and you just start kind of like not thinking about what's going on around you, and you get to your destination and you're like, oh my gosh, how'd I get here? That is also alpha brain waves. But in a sleep situation, this awake and alert and awake and drowsy period takes about, for a healthy sleeper, about 15 to 20 minutes. Then you hit what's called stage 1 NREM sleep. So let me explain this. There's 4 stages. Now, some textbooks only include 3 NREM stages, but we're going to talk about 4 NREM stages because 3 and 4 are so similar. And it's important to note that stage 1 is light sleep, and as you get into other stages, you get into deeper and deeper sleep, and those brain waves, of course, change. And all 4 of these stages are leading up to REM sleep. And we'll talk about REM in just a second. Sleep stages 1 through 4 are considered NREM sleep, and what that stands for is not REM or non-REM sleep. That means it's not REM. So you're in either REM sleep or not REM sleep. Not REM sleep or NREM sleep includes 4 stages. Stage 1 of not REM sleep is a very light stage of sleep. In this stage, you would have a mixture of alpha and theta brainwaves. You would be easily awoken if the dog barked or somebody shut the door or a loud car was outside your window. Stage 1 sleep is so precious because you got to get through that to get to the deeper levels of sleep. But if you're so easily awoken, it can kind of reset your melatonin levels and wake you up and make it hard to get into subsequent sleep. I've told students, and I use this and my children do, is like create a quiet zone if possible, and if not, like maybe have a fan or some light music to try to drown out outside noise. So stage 2 sleep is a little bit deeper, and in that stage you see what's called K complexes and burst of brainwave activity. One of the things, if you were sleeping with another person, or maybe you've had the situation where you have muscle twitching in your sleep, that shows up on a EEG as a burst of brainwave activity. Again, if the twitching was really strong, it would wake you up. Most people can sleep through that to get to stage 3/4. Stage 3/4 in the stages of NREM sleep are theta brainwaves, and then the deepest are the delta brainwaves. Stage 3/4 is also where a lot of sleep disorders occur, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So what happens during these stages, as you're getting into deeper levels of sleep, it is harder to wake somebody up as they're getting into deeper levels of sleep. But what's interesting is these are all still what's called NREM stages. After about an hour or so, when you're completely in a deep level of sleep, then you hit what's called REM sleep. REM sleep is rapid eye movement. That's what it stands for. It's typically where dreaming occurs. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a different kind of dreaming that can happen in the other stages, but scientists call that sleep thinking, and that's very shallow dreaming, very boring, routine. Sometimes it's just activities you did throughout the day, or you're just thinking of a conversation. When scientists call dreaming in REM sleep, they're referring to dreams that are creative and bizarre and whimsical and imaginative, and that's during REM sleep. So when we refer to dreaming, we're only going to refer it as what typically happens during REM. Now, you have to go through stages 1-4 to get to REM. And that's a big indicator of why a lot of people have sleep issues, is because they're not going through the stages, either because of sleep apnea or some other reason they wake up before they can get to REM. REM is considered quality sleep. REM is also the type of sleep that we need to feel truly rested the next day. And oddly, it's a time period where there's rapid brainwave activity. Brainwave activity that almost mimics being awake. But what happens during REM is you're not awake at all. Your body is completely physically paralyzed. Now, I should restate that as your voluntary muscles are completely paralyzed during REM, meaning you don't move. You can sleepwalk and sleep talk and sleep eat and have night terrors during stages 1-4, mostly 3 and 4. But once you hit REM, your body is frozen. Now, involuntary muscles are still moving, like you're still breathing and your heart's still beating, and all those involuntary processes are happening, but physically you can't move. And what's bizarre is that some people can get so freaked out with sleep paralysis, but all sleep paralysis is that you're frozen during this short period of REM, and if you wake up suddenly, you might feel like you still can't move, and you need to give your brain a couple seconds to catch up, and you're fine. There are multiple theories of why we dream, and there's multiple theories on perhaps why we're so still during REM. We don't need to act out our dreams. Evolutionarily speaking, that could be dangerous. So the body is very still. The body is resting on a very cellular biological level, and it's not moving. One thing is moving, and that's where it gets its name. During REM, your eyeballs are still moving rapidly underneath your eyelids. Moving your eyes is a voluntary muscle movement. You tell your eyes where to go. But during sleep, nothing else can move except for your eyes. So that gets its name from, I don't know if you can see this, your eyeballs moving rapidly underneath your eyelids. And that rapid eye movement is usually an indication of an individual looking around in their dreams. So everything else is frozen except for your eyes. And that's that rapid eye movement under the eyelids that it's named for. Now, if you go to slide number 9, it shows kind of throughout a sleep pattern throughout the night. So this is indicative of somebody who's going to bed around 11 p.m. and sleeping throughout the night. And if you notice, the chart shows that when you're awake and then the blue, and it gets deeper into blue, you're going from stage 1 down to stage 4, and that takes about an hour. Then you start to go out of the stages and you hit your first bout of REM, your first little section of REM. The longer you sleep through the night, you'll notice that the pink parts, or the reddish pink parts, or the REM stages, they get longer and longer as you sleep longer, and you don't go into deep sleep as you sleep longer as well. So in the beginning of the night, you're going into deep sleep, stage 3, 4, and that's where a lot of the initial sleep disorders occur, and we'll talk about that. Then you start to go out of it and you hit a little bit of REM, a little bit of dream. Now, everybody dreams. If you didn't have REM sleep, you couldn't restore the body and mind. We need REM. In fact, without REM, we can get very sick, and some people can have chronic illness because they don't get enough sleep. But we need REM, but there's no way that we just go to bed and have a ton of REM at one time. We get it in little spurts throughout the night. I always talk to my students and say it would be fascinating if somebody invented a machine that instantly put the brain into REM. If you got an hour of just pure REM sleep a night, you would feel so rested the rest of the day. The problem is we have to sleep to get in and out of it. We only get it little bits at a time. All that together is enough REM. But in little segments, if you only sleep 2 hours here, 3 hours here, 4 hours here, you're not getting enough REM, because you have to sleep 6, 7, 8 hours to get a lot of quality REM sleep. So you'll see in the chart, you go in and out of deep sleep, the REM gets longer, and you're only going to remember your dreams if you wake up during REM. And most people don't. Either they don't get enough REM, or when they wake up, it's in stages 1 through 4. If you're able to sleep longer, and sometimes you're able to sleep late, if you will, then you might have periods of time where you wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep. Then those are the time periods where you tend to get a lot of REM sleep, which might make you remember your dreams more often or realize you are dreaming. But if you don't wake up during that REM, you're not going to remember them. But the longer you get to sleep, the more dreaming, the better. A lot of scientists suggest that it's REM that is needed for quality restoring of the body, and there are some serious side effects when we don't get enough sleep, particularly in adolescence and in childhood. I've always stated that sleep should be a habit that your parents help you develop good habits at a very young age, because you need sleep for your brain to thrive, for your brain to grow, for your body to grow, and that can't be stressed enough. Particularly during adolescence, when you have that last growth spurt, you have that last growth spurt of the brain, that adolescents in general in today's society are sleep deprived. And a sleep deprived adolescent can have serious side effects to not getting enough sleep. A lot of scientists suggest that for teenagers, they need at the minimum 8 or 9 hours to feel fully rested and get the benefits of sleep. You don't need that throughout your entire life, but adolescents especially. That's why it's incredibly important that people that make rules and make set up schedules for young adults and teenagers know that if you're starting school at 7 a.m. For other reasons, so that children can get out sooner or for convenience, you're really going to impact those teenagers' brains, because those teenagers are getting up sometimes as early as 5 or 6 to get to school. And the problem with that is people will say, well, if they have to get up early, then they should go to bed earlier. Well, that's not that easy, and most people don't understand that science. In a teenager brain, which is different from a child's brain and it's different from an adult's brain, they don't produce melatonin as early as children and adults. Their melatonin production, which is what makes them tired, typically doesn't, regardless of how much they sleep and regardless of how tired they are, melatonin in an adolescent brain doesn't typically kind of kick in until 11, 12 o'clock at night. So it's not unusual that they don't fall asleep until that time, and therefore it's almost impossible for them to get the 8 or 9 hours they need if they're having to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning. Why is this important? It's important for learning, it's important for behavior, it's important for brain and body development. Schools that have changed their rules and their students start later in the day, later in the morning, I should say, they have better results on all levels. They have less tardies, less absences, less illness. They have better test scores, better behavior. So it is associated with almost everything we need to function. I don't think people realize that sleep is just as, or arguably, more important or just as important as our diet and our food intake. So we need to put importance to it. We need to make sure that we are taking care of our bodies and our mind and making sleep and sleep habits and a sleep environment a priority for sure. So you can read over the section on why we sleep. There's some theories, but basically sleep is important in every biological function at all ages. In fact, sleep deprivation later in life is associated with early Alzheimer's disease. So it has a lot of brain and body implications for the entire lifespan. But sleep is important. It helps clean metabolic waste products, meaning that the toxins that you build up during the day are released and flushed and kind of cleaned out of the body during that sleep period of time. It can maintain immune function. People can fight disease and illness better when they have better sleep and sleep routine. Learning and memory are improved with good sleep, and it also regulates mood and hormones. So if we go down now, you're welcome to look over the sections on dream. And we talked a little bit about that there's a difference between dream and sleep thinking. But dreaming and nightmares both, regardless of the function or why we do it or what they mean, they occur during REM sleep. And so I think a lot of people are fascinated by dreaming and symbolic dreaming and things of that sort. I always, encourage students to look at science behind those things if they're interested in it. But remember too that a lot of the mental processes that are occurring during dreaming are different from the processes we use during the day. So it's hard to analyze dreams. It's not as hard to analyze emotions in dreams. So if you really want to start getting into lucid dreaming or dreaming itself and look those things up, then the best science behind it says to look at the emotions associated with the dream and maybe associate those with emotions that you're dealing with in your waking life, in your waking day. All right, so disorders. Slide 16. Sleep disorders fall in two main categories. A lot of people in their lifetime suffer from sleep disruptions. In fact, I truly believe that this science has reflected that since we've had smartphones and laptops and technology in our face late at night, that sleep disorders are probably all-time high. I sincerely worry about children that are sleep deprived and teenagers that are sleep deprived, particularly as a result of access to technology. And unfortunately, when we give children their own ability to make those decisions of technology, we're expecting something from them that they're not able to regulate themselves. They're not able to understand the importance of these things. Therefore, it takes a responsible, loving, caring adult to know that we have to turn off this technology. We have to limit this technology to benefit the brain. So there are two types of sleep disorders: dysomnias and parasomnias. So with dysomnias, if you look on slide 17, these are disruptions in the amount, quality, or timing of sleep. The most common, I think some studies show 1 in 4 people in their lifetime will suffer from something called insomnia. That is a category under dysomnias. Insomnias are your inability to fall asleep. So it takes you, instead of the typical 20 minutes, it takes some people hours to fall asleep, or they start to fall asleep and they abruptly wake up. That's a form of insomnia. There's a really good video, TED Talk, in our lecture on the Blackboard side about insomnia. Difficulty staying asleep, so waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep on a regular basis, not just once in a while. This could be a chemical imbalance. It could be a serotonin imbalance. Or thirdly, being in bed or thinking you're sleeping 8 or 9 hours and always feeling tired. That could be a secondary problem, such as sleep apnea, but we'll talk about that. Sleep apnea is when a sleeper's airways, their breathing becomes blocked, or their airways become narrow, causing them to have shallow breathing or even stop breathing in their sleep. This can be very dangerous. A lot of people that seek help through a sleep lab probably go because they're having sleep apnea. If they don't know they have sleep apnea, it's common for somebody who sleeps with them or around them to bring that to their attention. The snoring is different, the behavior is different, and oftentimes the sleeper wakes up gasping for air. Even if they don't wake up all the way, their body is craving that oxygen, which can have multiple secondary biological issues. If you know somebody who has sleep apnea, you want to encourage them to talk to their doctor about that. There are treatments for it. There are sometimes surgery, but there are often treatments for it, that if an individual can fix their sleep apnea situation, they're not only going to get better sleep, but they're going to have significantly better health outcomes. It is very hard on the body to stop breathing multiple times during the night, during your sleep pattern, and your system just it takes a heavy toll on you biological when you do that. And then lastly is something called narcolepsy. And narcolepsy is a genetic disorder which an individual has overwhelming bouts of excessive daytime sleepiness. It is also indicative of uncontrollable episodes of sleep where people that suffer from narcolepsy will instantly go into REM, fall asleep in the middle of class or driving or walking, and it comes out of nowhere. It's like a sleep attack. And that too can be very dangerous and hard to treat, but it typically runs in families, and it needs to be, a physician needs to get involved if somebody experiences what's called narcolepsy. Then you have the other category, which is called parasomnias. With parasomnias, para means like kinda, somnia, asleep. And this is when I was talking about earlier that typically occurs in stages 3 and 4. So this is non-REM sleep, and this is stage 3 and 4 where a lot of parasomnias occur. During stage 3 and 4 and these types of sleep disorders, even though they can happen at any age, are actually more common in children, and people usually grow out and the brain kind of evolves out of these sleep disorders, but it's not uncommon for a young child, I would say mostly like around 4 to 10 years old, to have some sort of parasomnia in their lifetime. It could have a genetic predisposition, and it can also be triggered by external stimuli like stress or moving or events happening in that individual's life. So let's talk about a few of these. Number 1, sleep terrors. So sleep terrors happen in stage 3-4. So here's an indication when it's a 3-4 versus a REM sleep issue. REM, you're not moving. So if you're moving, it's in a non-REM stage. So with a sleep terror, this is where somebody has what looks like a severe panic attack, but they're completely asleep. They might thrash about, they might see things, they might scream, they might yell. The weirdest thing about a sleep terror is that somebody can go through the episode, never really fully wake up, and have no memory of it the next day. People in your family is going to know, or people that are sleeping with you are going to know, but these things can be very scary to watch. But bizarrely, the person that's going through them, unless you wake them up, they're not going to have any memory of it. And it's not really necessary to wake up somebody during a parasomnia unless they're going to hurt themselves or somebody else. Usually they'll go back to sleep. If this was over a long period of time, and there might be some psychological other things happening in this child or adult's life, you would want to see a physician. But most of the time, sleep terrors are just a stage, and people grow out of them. And they are associated with trauma and later in life, like PTSD. Sleepwalking, sleep eating, sleep talking, these are also considered parasomnias. And this is performing actions during stage 3-4. The interesting thing about it is most sleepwalkers and sleep talkers and sleep activity, people don't remember doing it the next day. They are in such a deep level of sleep that unless you wake them up, they have no clue they're walking around. There's kind of a wives' tale or kind of a misconception that you hear people say, oh, never wake a sleepwalker. Well, it depends. With sleepwalking, an individual shouldn't be woken up if they're just walking to their bed or they're safe in their home and you can guide them back to bed. Because if you abruptly wake up a sleepwalker, they're going to be terrified. They're not going to know why they're there or what's happening. And so that could be very traumatic. But if they're walking outside or they're, getting in their car or some kind of other bizarre, dangerous behavior, yes, you're going to want to wake them up. And you're going to want to try to explain to them what's happening. There are even a lot of sleep medications that make sleep activity more likely. And again, these people are not going to remember that the next day. So be very careful when you're taking sleep medications and look at those side effects very, very closely. There is one exception to the don't move REM rule, and that is a REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBM. This is on slide 19. This is a rare brain disease, and it's more typical in men over the age of 60, so it's not very common, but this is when people literally do act out their dreams. So they're in REM and they're moving, which is rare. It's a chronic condition. It can get worse. People need to be diagnosed and treated if they have REM sleep behavior disorder, meaning they sometimes need to be strapped into their bed or locked into their room so they don't hurt somebody or themselves. It can be dangerous acting out your dreams. You can injure yourself very easily. So these things need to be kind of addressed, even though they're very rare. If somebody is actually dreaming and acting out their dream and are completely asleep, that can be kind of terrifying. All right, so the last section, we're going through some of these pretty quickly, but the last section deals with hypnosis and meditation. One of my one of the things that I have found as I get older that is so helpful in my life and the life of people I know is meditation. Meditation is something I kind of learned about when I was younger. I associated it with different cultures. Now I realize the benefits of meditation, psychological and biological. I've had issues with insomnia and anxiety as an adult, and meditation seems to be the best medication with doing meditation on a regular basis, either through an app or YouTube, something you feel comfortable with, or some people are able to guide themselves through meditation. I really highly suggest you look at the data involved in meditation and how healthy and good it is for your brain and your body and growth and your moods. So there is a short YouTube video that I put on our lecture about meditation, but basically it's just a calm alternative state of consciousness where you have increased focus and decreased anxiety. On the same note is hypnosis. Hypnosis usually involves another person. Hypnosis is typically, when it's used properly, can be used in a therapeutic environment where a hypnotist who has been trained clinically to help their client get over issues or stop bad habits, like it can help people reduce anxiety or stop smoking or help with overeating. If somebody is a good candidate for hypnosis, it can be very productive and therapeutic in helping a person overcome something that is damaging to them. So hypnosis is similar to meditation for as far as brainwave activity, but it's characterized by deep relaxation and focused attention, and then typically a person who is susceptible to hypnosis is responsive to the hypnotist's suggestions. So a hypnotist can help you get to a very relaxed state of mind, similar to meditation, that same level of relaxation, usually through something called progressive relaxation. And then even though you're aware of what's going on one level, the hypnotist can make suggestions to help change your thinking pattern. So they make these suggestions, and somebody who is, a good candidate for hypnosis, not everybody is, can really make some progress of overcoming some disorders and dysfunctions in their lives. So there are, of course, limitations to hypnosis, and not everybody's a candidate, but there are no negative side effects to meditation. And I'm often talking to my students, especially students that are sleep deprived, students that experience a lot of anxiety or test anxiety, to incorporate a productive meditation habit into their life before you use medication or you turn to other types of treatment, and it can be extremely effective and extremely good for the brain. So that's all I want to talk about in this chapter. The last part of the chapter is kind of reinstating what we were talking about, good sleep habits, but let's go over a couple of these real quickly. First of all, make sure if you're having sleep issues, if you're not having sleep issues, great. Maybe later in life you need these tips or this information, but maybe you know somebody who does. Limit stimulants and coffee. For some people, they can't even or shouldn't drink Coca-Cola or caffeine, iced tea, anything after noon, or it can mess up their ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. Establish a good, quiet bedtime routine. I can't stress this enough for my students out there that are parents or caregivers. Make sure you give your child that gift of a good, quiet bedtime routine where they start getting ready for bed early, warm bath, quiet activities, lack of technology, and that they sleep in a room that is quiet and blocked from most noise. That children are getting at least 10, 12 hours of sleep in a day. And then we said adolescents still need a lot of sleep. So that bedtime routine of falling asleep at a decent time, incorporating darkness, and then waking up at a certain time and getting active is very important to overall health and wellness. Create conditions for restful sleep. Things like bedding and the firmness or softness of a mattress, the temperature in the room, the darkness in the room. These are all things that are external that you need to control as much as possible. And try to maintain a consistent sleep-wake cycle. Try to go to bed around the same time every night. Get your 8 or 9 hours and try to wake up at the same time every day, even on the weekends. Because what happens is you can get into a good routine during the week, be more active, have better mood stabilization, and then the weekends kind of mess it up when you stay up too late and you sleep too late and then you have to start all over on Monday. As much as possible, follow the same routine. Body does well on routine and habit and consistency and predictability. So create that type of sleep environment in your own life, and your sleep habits in your own life, and your overall wellness, happiness, physical and mental mood will be improved, if not optimal. So with that being said, if it's late, go to bed, turn off the screen, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks.